my husband, 29M, knocked out my brother, 28M, for calling me, 26F, a whore, and now my parents want me to choose. What do I do? This past weekend has left me in a haze of shock, anger, sadness, and confusion. I keep replaying everything in my mind, hoping to somehow make sense of it all, but instead, it just feels like I'm spiraling deeper into a dilemma with no real way out. The whole thing has put me in a position where I'm forced to make an impossible choice, one that could end up tearing apart the people I love most in the world. I just don't know what to do. Let me start from the beginning, to give you all the context I can. My husband, Sam, 29M, and I, 26F, have been married for 2 years. We've had a solid relationship, built on love, trust, and mutual respect. He's been my rock through some really hard times, and I couldn't have asked for a better partner. He treats me with so much love and kindness. And on top of that, he's incredibly protective of me. Sometimes his protectiveness borders on over the top, but I usually see it as endearing, just part of who he is. Family means a lot to both of us, and we'd always managed to blend our families together pretty well. Or at least, I thought we had. Then there's my brother, Mark, 28M. Mark and I have always been close, even if he has a rougher, edgier side to him. Growing up, he was your typical big brother, always teasing me, sometimes overstepping boundaries, but ultimately supportive in his own way. He had my back when I needed him, and we both respected each other's personal lives. Up until now, he's never crossed any serious lines. So, when he blindsided me with insults that day, I was left feeling hurt, confused, and honestly, pretty shocked. The whole situation happened during a barbecue at my parents' house. They'd invited everyone over for one of those big family gatherings they love to throw. Sam and I were excited to go, to relax, catch up with family, and just enjoy the day. Everything was going fine, until Mark started picking at me. I noticed it during small moments at first, just little jabs that seemed to come out of nowhere. "Oh, you'd know all about that, wouldn't you?" he sneered at one point, which I tried to brush off as his typical joking. But then, it became clear he wasn't joking at all. Each comment got sharper, crueler. I could feel the tension building as his words went from mild insults to outright nastiness. I remember Sam pulling him aside at one point, talking to him in low, calm tones, hoping to cool things down. I could tell Sam was frustrated, but he didn't want to escalate things if he didn't have to. But things didn't improve. Maybe Sam's attempt at reason only added fuel to the fire, because an hour later, Mark came up to me, loud enough for everyone around to hear, and spat out the words, "You know you're a fucking whore, right?" It was like time slowed down. I could feel the eyes of family and friends on us, could hear the silence that fell over the gathering as everyone processed what had just been said. My heart sank, my face flushed with embarrassment and anger. It felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I wanted to scream, to demand what I'd done to deserve this attack, but I was frozen in shock. And then, all at once, Sam was there, standing in front of me. He moved me back gently but firmly, stepping between me and my brother. The look in his eyes was pure rage, but controlled. He stared Mark down, and I heard him say, in a voice low and trembling with anger, "I told you not to talk to her like that." Before I knew what was happening, Sam had punched Mark square in the face. Mark stumbled, his face twisting in shock, and then he hit the ground, knocked out cold, blood trickling from his nose. I stood there, my heart pounding, my mind racing to process what had just happened. In an instant, everything had erupted into chaos. My mother's scream cut through the silence as she rushed to Mark's side. "What is wrong with you?" she shouted at Sam, tears already streaming down her face. "How could you do this to your own family?" My dad, meanwhile, stared at Sam with a look I'd never seen before. He didn't yell, but the disappointment and anger in his face were clear as day. I could see how much he hated seeing his son-in-law lay hands on his son, no matter the reason. Family members surrounded Mark, helping him to his feet, as Sam took my hand and tried to pull me away. "We're leaving," he said, his voice tense. He didn't even glance back at my brother, still dazed and wobbly as he was helped onto a chair. But before we could walk away, my mom grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "You're not going anywhere," she hissed, her voice filled with rage. "You're going to explain to me why you think it's acceptable for your husband to assault your brother like this." I pulled my arm back, fighting back tears, and said, "He called me a whore, Mom. He's been demeaning me all day." Sam tried to talk to him, to calm him down, but he wouldn't stop. And then he went too far. I could see that my words weren't reaching her. Her face remained stone cold as she shook her head. "It doesn't matter what he said. He's your brother, and family doesn't do this to family," she snapped, her voice so loud that I was sure the neighbors could hear. I tried to make her understand, to explain how hurtful Mark's words had been, how they'd cut so deeply that it felt like I was bleeding. But she didn't want to hear it. Instead, she crossed her arms, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "You have a choice to make. Either you stay married to that man who thinks he can solve problems with his fists, or you stand with your family and leave him. It's up to you." My dad nodded in agreement, his face set and unyielding. "We raised you better than this," he said. "We can't condone this kind of violence, not against family." Sam looked at them with disbelief. He didn't try to argue, didn't try to justify what he'd done. He just said, "I warned him. No one talks to my wife that way." And with that, he took my hand and led me away, leaving my parents and brother standing in stunned silence behind us. Now, here I am, caught between the people who raised me and the man I love. My parents have been there for me through so much. They supported me financially, emotionally, and in every way possible when I needed it. My mom and I have always been close. She was the one I'd call when I was overwhelmed or lost, and she always knew exactly what to say. My dad, though more reserved, was always my silent supporter, the person I knew I could count on in tough times. They've both sacrificed so much to help me succeed, and I owe them so much. But now, they're asking me to make a choice I don't think I can make. Sam, on the other hand, is my partner, my best friend. He's the person I chose to spend my life with, and I know he acted out of love, out of a need to protect me. I'm not angry at him for standing up for me. Deep down, I'm actually grateful that he was there to defend me. My brother's words cut me so deeply, and in that moment, Sam was the only one who saw how much pain I was in. He didn't just stand by and let it happen, he took action, maybe too impulsively, but out of love. It's not like I wanted him to punch my brother, but after everything that was said, I can't deny that I felt protected. The day after the barbecue, I woke up to a storm of text messages from family members. Some were checking in on me, while others were sending passive-aggressive messages like, "I can't believe Sam did that to Mark. I hope you're thinking long and hard about this marriage." It felt surreal, like I was in the middle of a soap opera, and I wanted to just shut off my phone and ignore it all. But it didn't stop there. My mom called me, and the conversation quickly turned hostile. She didn't want to hear anything about how Mark had treated me or the names he'd called me. Her only focus was on what Sam did, the disrespect he'd shown by laying hands on my brother. I tried to explain, to make her understand, but she was adamant. "Your brother was out of line," she admitted, but then added, "but that doesn't excuse violence. If Sam's willing to hit family over something like this, what's stopping him from hitting you one day?" Her words felt like a slap in the face. I'd never once felt unsafe around Sam. He's never been anything but gentle with me. Hearing her imply otherwise made me realize she had already made up her mind about him. In the following days, the ultimatum from my parents became more intense. My mom went as far as saying that if I chose Sam, they'd cut me off completely, not just financially, but emotionally, too. It broke my heart because I never thought my parents would try to control me in such a severe way. They'd always been supportive, but now it felt like they were using their past support as leverage to manipulate me. I felt trapped, torn between loyalty to the family that raised me and loyalty to the husband I'd chosen to build my own life with. One night, as I lay in bed with Sam, I broke down and told him everything. I told him about the ultimatum, about how my parents were demanding I choose between him and them, and about how lost I felt. He held me close, letting me cry until I ran out of tears, and then he said something that stopped me cold. "I'd never make you choose, you know," he whispered. "If your parents meant that much to you, I'd never stand in the way. But you have to ask yourself if they're really being fair here. They're asking you to give up our life together because I stood up for you. Do you really want to live under their control forever?" His words made me think hard. Was this really about Sam's actions, or was it about my parents wanting to hold on to control over my life? My mind flashed back to times when my parents had tried to steer my decisions. I'd never noticed it much before because it was subtle, a comment here, a suggestion there. But this time, it felt like they were crossing a line. I knew I had to get to the bottom of what had happened with Mark. I couldn't understand where all that hatred had come from, and I wasn't ready to just brush it off. The next day, I decided to meet up with him, hoping to have a real conversation and get some answers. When we met, he was still sporting a black eye and a bandage on his nose. The sight of him like that tugged at my heart, even though I was still angry at him. I wanted to believe that there was an explanation, a reason for why he'd acted so out of character. "Why did you say those things?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's going on, Mark? You've never treated me like that before. What happened?" He looked away, rubbing the back of his neck, avoiding my gaze. For a long time, he didn't answer, and I was beginning to think he wouldn't. But finally, he sighed and looked at me, his expression hard and unreadable. "You really want to know?" he asked bitterly. "Fine. I don't like Sam. I never have. I think he's arrogant, thinks he's better than us. And I can't stand watching him treat you like his property. You may think he's this perfect husband, but he's controlling you, isolating you. You can't even see it. I was taken aback. Controlling? Isolating? Sam wasn't like that at all. But it dawned on me that maybe Mark had built up this resentment over the years, perceiving Sam's protective nature as something darker. I realized then that I was dealing with years of pent-up jealousy and resentment, things that Mark had apparently never let go of. I'm sorry if you feel that way, I told him, trying to stay calm, but you had no right to say those things to me. And if you think Sam is so controlling, maybe that's because he sees how quick you and Mom and Dad are to try and control me. I'm his wife, Mark. I love him, and he loves me. And I deserve to be with someone who respects me enough to stand up for me. He scoffed, shaking his head. So, what? You're choosing him over us, then? After everything we've done for you? His words stung, but I felt a strange clarity in that moment. This wasn't about Sam being wrong for standing up for me. This was about my family's inability to let go, to accept that I was no longer a little girl they could influence and mold. I'm not choosing anyone over anyone, I said firmly. I love you all. But I'm an adult, and I have to make my own choices. If you all can't accept Sam, that's your decision. But don't make me choose. I won't do it. When I got home that night, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. I'd finally stood up to my family in a way I hadn't before, but I was terrified of the consequences. What if they really cut me off? What if they never spoke to me again? Over the next few days, things were tense. My parents refused to reach out, and I stayed away, letting them process what I'd said. In the meantime, Sam and I focused on ourselves, talking through the emotions we'd both been bottling up. He admitted he was still angry and frustrated by my family's response, but he promised me he'd support whatever decision I made. After nearly 2 weeks of silence, my mom finally called. Her voice was softer this time, less accusatory. She told me she missed me, that she hated what was happening, but she still couldn't accept Sam's behavior. However, she was willing to try to move forward without forcing a choice, as long as we agreed to some boundaries. I agreed, cautiously. I knew things would never be exactly the same, but maybe this was the first step toward healing. I didn't want to lose my family, and I didn't want them to lose me, either. But I also wouldn't compromise the relationship I had with Sam. He'd shown me that I deserve respect, both from my partner and my family, and I wasn't willing to settle for less. As things stand now, the road ahead is uncertain. I'm not sure how things will evolve with my family, or if they'll ever truly accept Sam. But I do know one thing, I'll never regret standing up for myself and choosing the love and respect that I know I deserve. And maybe, just maybe, this experience will make us all stronger in the end.